Hi everyone and welcome to another game review by ThinkerThemer. I'm Amy, this is my wonderful partner Maggie. Together we review games from two different perspectives. I'm all about the mechanics, Maggie's all about the theme. Today we are reviewing a game from Pandasaurus called The Loop, which was designed by Maxime, Rambourg and Théo Rivière. And this is a cooperative experience, which is different for us. We don't really play any cooperative games, but this one was getting a lot of amazing reviews. And so Pandasaurus reached out and asked if we wanted to check it out. And we thought, yeah, let's put ourselves out of our comfort zone.
Let's see if we can co-op.
Maybe we're just co-op players waiting to happen.
Maybe.
Maybe. So we thought we'd give it a go, and it must be like only the second review of a cooperative game that we've ever done.
Yeah. So let's talk about what The Loop is about. So in The Loop, we are playing as different agents for the agency, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to stop Dr. Faux. So Dr. Faux has decided to take over the universe. The way he's going to do this is by taking control of time and space, time traveling throughout different eras. What he doesn't realize though is as he's doing this, he's creating little rifts in time, which can lead to vortexes, which will probably lead to the end of space-time as we know it. And so that's what we need to make sure that we stop. Obviously, we don't want him to have control of the universe, but also we don't want to, destroy everything along the way. The way we're going to do this is we're all going to have our own little asymmetric abilities and powers, and we're going to be chasing him around the different eras, trying to get rid of all these clones that he's going to be creating of himself, and trying to get rid of all these rifts that he's putting in place as well, collecting different artifacts and using them along the way to help us keep things under control.
Now, all of this takes place on this beautiful board that you can see in front of us, which represents the 7 different eras in different colors. And each of us is going to be playing, as Maggie said, an agent, and we are going to have a deck of cards that's going to help us get things done, and an asymmetric player ability that is kind of small but quite important in the game. And we are going to be moving around these different eras to really clean up Dr. Faux's mess so that we don't lose the game. I'll start by talking about some key features of the board. One of the cool features of this board is at the beginning of the game, you're going to be randomly allocating these objectives to the outside of the board. So they slot in here next to each one of the eras, and then at any given time, you're going to have 2 revealed. So you don't know what the other objectives are going to be until you get to reveal those, either by when one of these gets destroyed or completed. And the way that you're going to win the game is to be able to complete 4 of these objectives. The other key feature of the board, and probably what everyone will be drawn to, is this little cube dispenser or cube tower that's going to be dispensing chaos all over the board. Now, the way that this chaos is dispensed in the game is really driven by this escalating system of pressure that is created by these cards. There is a deck of cards off to the side that represents each of the different eras. So there are 7 eras, 7 cards, and there are 3 rounds in this game where you're going to be running through that entire deck. If you can't beat Dr. Faux by the end of that 3rd round, then you lose the game. But there are also 2 other ways that you can lose this game. One is, as this little tower here is dispensing red rift cubes, when one of these eras gets too many of them, that is more than 3, it gets destroyed, the objective goes away, and instead a vortex takes its place. So if you get 4 of those vortexes anywhere around the board, that's it, you immediately lose the game. Also, if you blow up the same era twice, i.e. a double vortex, you also lose the game. So the way that this game is going to put pressure on you is by dispensing these cubes that are going to lead to those vortexes. Yeah. And at the start of your turn in the beginning, you are going to be adding clones to eras. Now, clones are the other destructive element because when you draw a clone, which happens at the beginning of everybody's turn, it will show you where to place it on the back of that clone. And then it will have a different era on the front of it. And what you're going to be needing to do is pushing these clones around the board to the era from which they came and to send them home. So this clone will need to go to the purple era, which will then destroy it and it will get taken off the board. But the reason why these clones are so annoying is because when you draw one of these cards at the start of your turn, it's going to tell you which era Dr. Faux is going to appear, and you move the little cube tower so that it's facing that era. So in this case, the pink era is where Dr. Faux is going to appear. And then you need to put cubes down the cube tower to the count of 1 for each of the clones in that era, plus 2. So in this case, 4 of these red cubes will be dropped into this cube tower to be dispensed across the different eras. Now, what's interesting about this game is, as I mentioned, you are trying not to get more than 3, so you need to be rushing around to really clean up these eras. So all of the cards that you have in your hand are going to enable you to get things done in this game. One of those things is to remove those red rift cubes off the board to stop those eras from blowing up. The other is to push these clones around to get rid of those as well, because they lead to, well, more red rift cubes. And the other thing that you can do is use these energy cubes. So you can place more of these energy cubes, and they are really important. So the green cubes allow you to, if you consume one of them or use one of them, you can actually take an extra step, which is really useful because movement is quite challenging in this game. Or you can use them to perform what's called a loop, and hence the name of the game. When you use one of those cubes, it allows you to reuse your hand of cards. So in your turn, you will have 3 cards in your hand that you can play out on your turn. And then they basically get discarded, and you'll draw 3 new cards in kind of a small deck building element in this game. But what's interesting is when you do a loop, you will be able to reset your exhausted cards. So in Maggie's example, if she were to use a green cube to do a loop and she had used these 2 cards, because these 2 cards are from the same suit, you would be able to refresh both of them and use them again. And that is really important because you want to extend your turn and do as much as you can, because at the end of your turn and the start of the next player's turn, more chaos is going to be unleashed onto this board. Finally, to do that deck building element, wherever you end your turn, you will be able to pick up one of the available cards on that era, which also get added into the game at the beginning of everybody's turn. They will go into your draw pile to be used in the next round.
So that sounds like a fair bit of chaos, and it is. And so let's talk a little bit about what it feels like to play it. Particularly, let's talk a little bit about theme. So from a thematic point, first thing I'll say, table presence-wise, beautiful. Like, this is something that I love the artwork. I love the use of color. I love all the different eras have more of a symbolic nod to that time period. I love how even the little tokens and all the quality of all of these components is very, very high. I love how with all the little clone tokens, even though it's a very small amount of a picture of part of Dr. Faux's face, the accessories and almost like you can kind of get a hint of what he's wearing. That matches with the different eras. Same with the cards, so your artifacts, they all obviously come from one of the eras, and the artifacts themselves make sense as something that would have been created or used in that time frame. I also love the illustrations of it, and a couple of even the titles got me giggling a little bit, which is always like a nice little bonus. Makes sense, again, like wherever, whatever era Dr. Faux is going to be appearing in, and we're kind of moving that tower there, that's where the ripples are likely going to be happening. So that's why either that era or the 2 eras sort of adjacent to it. So again, the dropping of the cubes sort of makes sense. I guess the element of randomness of how many rifts are going to be happening and where they'll fall, that kind of makes sense. In terms of, obviously, we're more usually Euro strategy type players. I particularly love having full information, not a big fan of not having control or that element of luck. That definitely adds to that stress and that sort of feeling out of control or sometimes like, oh no, like everything is sort of conspiring against us.
Yeah, and we can talk about, I guess, the feeling of the game. But I think it's important to think about the type of gamer that we are versus the type of gamer that you are. Because like Maggie said, we generally don't play a lot of games that have high luck levels, and we prefer perfect information, and we prefer competing with each other. But we have had exceptions where we've played games such as Pandemic Legacy. We've played that the whole way through. and also Spirit Island we've played, and we really adore Kitchen Rush, which is a game that is cooperative, but the pressure is put on by the sand timers.
Yeah.
So we do every now and then enjoy a cooperative experience, but in general, the interesting thing about this game is it's really all about the cleanup. The whole game, you are spending your time cleaning up the board in order to mitigate against the risk of the falling cubes, but also the clones creating more problems than you would have otherwise had without them. And this creates, as Maggie mentioned, a lot of unpredictability in the game, which I could see would be a much more fun experience, probably, obviously with gamers that enjoy that type of thing, but also maybe with a higher player count, because this game is so hard.
So difficult.
So
we
hard.
struggle so much.
And we were like, the whole time we were playing it, we were playing game after game and losing game after game. And we were checking the rule books and we were like, are we doing something wrong? And then we were like, or is it just because we don't know how to cooperate with each other?
Or just really bad at co-op because we never do it?
Yeah, but actually, I think this game is just hard.
Yeah.
Like it's one of the harder games that we've played. Like we've played Atlantis Rising, for example, and some of those other co-op games that I've mentioned. I thought our win ratio was much higher in Pandemic than it was here. This is tough.
I'm gonna say, look, it's not hard to play. Like the actual, like understanding what you're doing is fairly straightforward. It's hard to beat. So you can teach this fairly quickly, and you can kind of play it fairly easily. I think the other tricky thing with this is the artwork sort of lulled at least me into a false sense of security, going, oh, this looks kind of very friendly and inviting and kind of fun. It is tough to beat. Like it is. This is going to be, and in particular, maybe we just had particularly bad luck when it comes to any but it just felt like it didn't matter what you tried to do. Even with your hand, it feels like you have those 3 actions, and you can do some loops and stuff. But that can be tricky because
and we were playing the game at its base level, stripped back, least complex version of itself. So that sabotage mode, which is its base level. And it appears, like Maggie was saying, as a family game, but do not be lulled into a false sense of security with this game. This is a gamer's game, and it is challenging. And if you're looking for a game that's really going to challenge you to win, this is definitely one of those. I think that it's even harder at 2 players, and the reason being is that for the most part you can only take one step at a time when moving around across the different eras on the board, and so it would be really helpful to have other players that are on the other side being able to clean up that side of the board. So we've only played this at 2 players. We are still in hard lockdown in Melbourne, unfortunately. But it was like a real challenge for us. And I think it wasn't until about our 5th game where we had our win. And even that felt like it was on a knife's edge. We just made it. And so this game, it really ramps up in difficulty across the 3 rounds really quickly. By the 3rd round, you're adding 3 clones at the start of every person's turn. And that is super punishing.
Yeah, I would say, like, I think it would be rare that you'd get to go through the entire, like that you'd lose because you went through all of the 3 rounds. Usually you will well and truly lose well before then, because it'll either be vortexes, you'll get too many vortexes, or you'll double vortex an area. The other thing that I find interesting is, again, like it makes sense thematically that you don't know, like, luck is luck. And so, but this is one of the things that I can kind of find frustrating is you might have an area where you're putting down 4 cubes, and yes, there's 3 different places where they might fall, and you had just done a beautiful job of cleaning it up, and all of those cubes may end up falling in the same area, just because that's how randomness can work.
Yeah, or even the clones get added to that area, even though it was completely clean before.
Yeah, exactly. And so you kind of feel like, oh, come on. Which again, if you like that element, then that's well captured here.
So has this game really woken up the latent co-op player in us? Probably not. No. This is probably not a game for us because of all the things that we've mentioned about the luck in the game, and also just in general being a cooperative game. But if you love games like multiplayer experiences of Pandemic and Spirit Island and that type of game, I could totally see how this would be a worthy addition to your collection, because it is really well designed and it is definitely a difficult challenge. You also played it solo.
I did. So it's really interesting the way that they've implemented the solo, because all you're really doing is you get to choose how many agents you play with. You're mixing all of their different decks into one master deck, and then you've got all of your agent cards in front of you, and you're going to be drafting from that deck and allocating them to the correct agent, and whichever agent gets to have their full hand of 3 cards first, then they become the active agent taking this turn. So that was a really interesting way of kind of going, oh, I get to play with multiple meeples around the board and sort of be tackling a few different things. But there's that element of like, ooh, I don't necessarily know. There's some ways of maybe controlling it, but mostly you don't really know who's going to get to do their turn next. So that was interesting. I found it fairly engaging, but it's the same puzzle, and so that element of luck and not feeling like I've got full information meant that it's not really for me. But if you do enjoy that sort of thing, I thought it was a really nice implementation of a solo. Yeah,
that's the thing, is like ultimately I think our enjoyment came down to the fact where, can you be happy with the fact that the game will beat you because of a bad drop of those rift cubes, because that happened multiple times where it felt like we were working really hard to get to a particular objective, and then that objective just being blown up and taken from the game. And then it almost feels like you can't come back from that sometimes. Sometimes it feels like you're too far through in the game, that losing an objective is really going to mean that you're not going to win this round. But if you like that kind of challenge and you like that surprise element of the game beating you, then you will certainly enjoy this game experience, I think. One thing that I would say is, if you are buying it for a 2-player experience, there's one objective in there that is almost impossible to complete, which is the surround Dr. Faux objective. And it's just because you are so spread out on this board, it's almost impossible to complete. So we remove that from the game. I think that there's some certain combos of characters that also work better at a 2-player count to utilize their asymmetric abilities. But you can it's kind of fun to work that out along the way. But that is our review of the loop. If you enjoyed this review, please hit like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we will be back with more board game reviews soon. But bye for now. Bye.